Welcome to this explainer on heritage, memory, and identity. Today, we're going to explore a really fascinating framework for cultural and religious identity. And, to really grasp how this works, we aren't going to kick things off with high-level philosophy. Actually, scratch that. We're going to start with a 13-year-old boy named Zhen and a rather heated argument he's having with his dad.
So Zhen, who lives in Malaysia, is pushing back, hard, against his father's demand that he learn Chinese. His dad wants him to learn the whole shebang, the full script, the reading, the writing. But Zhen, well, like pretty much any teenager who feels they have way better things to do, he's just not interested. He looks at the modern world and argues, hey, English gives me all the practical utility I need. From a purely functional, resume-building standpoint, he literally cannot see what learning his heritage language adds to his life.
Okay, let's dive into this. Because as it turns out, Zhen is actually asking the completely wrong question. It's really not about which language is more useful to get a job. What he really needs to ask is what a language actually does for him, given who he is, where he comes from, and where he wants to go.
When we break language down, we see it does a few very specific things. Yes, obviously it provides access to knowledge. Yes, it enables civic participation and opens up vital economic networks. But crucially, and this is the big one, language also carries identity and cultural continuity. And that fourth pillar, that's exactly the piece Zhen was missing in his argument.
But when Zhen actually sits with this honestly, away from the friction and shouting of the argument with his dad, something real surfaces. He has this profound realization. He realizes, I want to be able to talk to my grandmother in the language she laughs in. He realizes he wants to walk into a room in his part of the world and actually be legible to his own heritage, rather than feeling like a total stranger to his own family history.
That takes us to passive versus examined belonging. You see, Zhen's realization about language bridges perfectly into a much larger, way more complex conversation: how young people hold their cultural and religious beliefs. We're shifting away from the realm of passive inheritance and moving right into examined belonging.
We really have to contrast two very different realities here. On one hand, think of the teenager who opens a textbook out of blind compliance, simply because a parent demanded it, right? They never even thought to ask why. Contrast that with Zhen, who has made a genuine, intentionally examined choice to belong. He's actively choosing to hold the thread that connects him to his community because he actually looked at what it means. Now in the short term, if you walked past their rooms today, both of these teens might look exactly identical sitting at a desk, opening a textbook. But their internal realities? Night and day. The one who made a conscious choice isn't just surviving the lesson. They are going to carry that tradition far, far differently into the next generation because they are actually awake to their own life.
Enter the Open PMC Protocol. This is a structural educational framework designed specifically to help students navigate that exact transition, moving from passive inheritance to conscious choice. It's essentially a framework built to wake students up to the choices they're implicitly making every single day. And I find this absolutely fascinating. If you look at how many major world traditions, despite having totally different vocabularies and ultimate beliefs, they all independently diagnose the exact same core problem. Whether you're looking at Islamic, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, or even secular frameworks, they all hit the nail on the head. Our human default is unconscious drift. We just float along, inheriting things without really choosing them. And honestly, in the AI age, that drift is more continuous and dangerous than ever.
Now, it's vital to understand the Open PMC Protocol is absolutely not a competing religion or tradition. Rather, it's an educational architecture. It provides what it calls the landscape. It gives teenagers the necessary vantage point to step back and actually examine their inheritance, showing them that different, highly serious people have made different choices for genuine reasons. This matters because it's exactly how we build resilient adults.
So the crucial point here is taking Zheng's language analogy and applying it directly to worldviews and belief systems. Just look at the massive difference between passive inheritance and conscious belonging. It's literally the difference between wearing a belief system because it was glued to you at birth versus trying it on, feeling its weight, and consciously choosing to wear it.
A student who goes through this journey becomes what we call an awakened learner. They understand the landscape. They've genuinely examined their own tradition. And because of this, they make a choice that cannot be easily dissolved by some sharp debate in a college dorm room or by meeting a new friend from a totally different background. Why? Because exposure to alternatives actually preceded their choice. Their belief is incredibly resilient.
Which brings us to the flip side, the walled-in identity.
This builds directly into the primary danger of not providing this educational landscape. When we fail to let young people examine their inheritance, we aren't protecting them. Instead, we create fragile, unexamined belief systems. We create walled-in identities.
So what is that? Well, a walled-in identity basically means a person's beliefs are completely indistinguishable from their sense of self. Because they never actively chose their tradition, they don't just hold their beliefs, they are their beliefs. So when they encounter a differing viewpoint, it doesn't feel like a simple intellectual disagreement. It feels like a literal existential attack on their very existence, which triggers intense hostility and defensiveness.
And impartially looking at the sources, this unexamined fragility manifests identically across the entire spectrum of human groups. It happens in religious communities that treat honest questions as apostasy. It happens in secular groups that view any faith as a massive intellectual failure. And it happens in political tribes that treat rivals as fundamentally dangerous. This walled-in fragility is, quite frankly, the root cause of so much worldly conflict today.
So how do we fix it? That leads us to preserving tradition without force. To resolve this conflict, we have to look at the ultimate outcome of this educational framework and how it allows communities to preserve their traditions deeply and authentically, without ever having to use force, fear, or literal walls.
This right here is the true foundation of genuine pluralism. And by the way, true pluralism isn't just some imposed tolerance where everyone is told to sit down, stay quiet, and not argue. No way. It is the genuine, mutual respect of people who recognize that others have also made conscious, heavily examined choices about their lives. Just consider the stark contrast in everyday life. A Muslim teen actively choosing Islam and a Buddhist teen actively choosing the Eightfold Path can respect one another because they are both non-dogmatic players. They recognize they both exercise the exact same fundamental human capacity for choice. They don't fear the alternative, unlike the walled-in identity, which literally has to resist alternatives just to survive.
Ultimately, the Open PMC Protocol is entirely model agnostic. It's not a threat to any tradition, but rather a capacity that makes any tradition stronger. It aims to fortify a community by taking that extreme fragility of passive inheritance and replacing it with the profound, unshakable strength of conscious choice.
So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to chew on. If you could give your child one educational gift that would stay with them for life, what would it be? Is the capacity to hold whatever beliefs you hold with open eyes the greatest gift we can give the next generation? Think about Zhen opening that textbook. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. That changes absolutely everything. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning and keep your eyes open.